Alright guys, before we get started, any questions over any of the homework? Any questions over any of the homework problems? Alright guys, we're continuing on the note sheet from Friday. Continuing on, finishing up the note sheet from Friday. If I remember correctly, I believe this is the problem we stopped off on. We got to this problem here. 1 over 2x plus 5 is equal to x over 11x plus 8. Now again, we do have restrictions. Because our restrictions are going to be whatever is going to make the denominators be 0. Now in this case here, we have two places where we could have a division of 0. 2x plus 5 and 11x plus 8. Now with the 2x plus 5, we can go on and solve by subtracting 5 from both sides first, giving us 2x is equal to negative 5. Divide by 2, telling us that if x is equal to negative 5 halves, we have a division of 0, so x cannot be negative 5 halves. We can do the same thing with our 11x plus 8. We can start off by subtracting 8, telling us that 11x is equal to negative 8. Divide both sides by 11, telling us that if x is equal to negative 8 elevenths, we'd have a division of 0, so that does not work. Least common denominator. Now, 2x plus 5, 11x plus 8, both of those are factored and simplified as they get. There's nothing in common between the two. So what we can do is multiply this through by 11x plus 8 and 2x plus 5. And the reason we do this is to get the denominator simplified. We want to reduce all of our fractions down. Because with the one on the left, the 2x plus 5 and 2x plus 5 will cancel. The one on the right, the 11x plus 8 and 11x plus 8 cancels, leaving us with 1 times 11x plus 8, which is just going to be 11x plus 8. And the one on the right is going to be x times 2x plus 5. So multiplying through by our 2x plus 5 and 11x plus 8 simplify all of our fractions. It's going to make it easier to work with. Now 11x plus 8 is as simplified as it gets, at least for now. On the right side, we can distribute the x. X times 2x is going to give us 2x squared. X times our 5 is going to give us 5x. Now this one here is the first one we've worked with where we had a variable with an exponent bigger than 1. Alright, so this one is the first one we've dealt with in this lesson where we have x squared, an x squared term. Anytime we have a variable with the power greater than 1, so x squared, x cubed, we need to get the equation equal to 0. We need to move everything over onto the same side. Now the first thing we can do is subtract 11x from both sides. Because 11x minus 11x is going to give us 0 plus 8, or just 8. On the right hand side, we still have our 2x squared. But 5x minus 11x will give us negative 6x. And then lastly, we're going to subtract 8 from both sides. Now the left hand side will become 0 like we want it. 2x squared minus 6x minus 8. There we go. Question on how we got this equal to 0. Now, the main reason we got it equal to 0 is because we want to try factoring this. Because if we can factor it and get multiple sets of parentheses or multiple things being multiplied together to equal 0, one of them is going to have to be 0. And when we look at this here, there is a greatest common factor between these three terms. And it is 2. And if we factor 2 out of our 2x squared minus 6x minus 8, we'll get 2 times x squared minus 3x minus 4. Now, luckily for us here, x squared minus 3x minus 4 will factor. So we'll have our two sets of parentheses with 3 spaces. Since our third term is negative, our signs are opposite. Factors of x squared are x and x. Yes. All right. And if we check this here, x times negative 4 is going to be negative 4x. 1 times x is going to be positive 1x, telling us that the middle term is indeed negative 3x. Now, we do have 2 or more things multiplied together to equal 0, so one of these is going to have to be 0. Now, the 2 places where x does show up is with our x plus 1 and x minus 4. We're not going to do anything with the 2 because there's no way we can plug a value in with the 2. It's just 2. It's just a number, so we leave it by itself. And the only 2 places we can get 0 is with our x plus 1 and x minus 4. Now, with our x plus 1 at this point, we can subtract 1 from both sides, telling us that one of the solutions is negative 1. We can do a similar thing with x minus 4. We can add 4 to both sides, telling us that x is equal to 4. So negative 1 and positive 4 are our solutions. Questions over this here? Now, is either one of these one of our restrictions we listed at the start? Well, no. So both of those solutions work. Questions on any of this here so far? All right. We're going to go and look at the next one. We want to solve 5 over x plus 7 over 4 is equal to negative 9x. 9 over x. Got you. Restrictions. Now, we do have 3 denominators. We have one that's x, one that's 4, and another that is x. Out of the 3 denominators, there's only 2 that we can plug a value in for. And they both end up being the actual same thing. It's x and x. So again, that value that we plug in for x cannot be 0. Well, that's just telling us that x cannot be 0. Least common denominator. So out of our 3 terms, we have x, the middle one that's 4, and one more that's x. So out of our least common denominator, these 3 denominators, x shows up in 2 different places. But in each of those places, how many times does it show up? Once. Even though it does show up in 2 different places, it only shows up once. So the least common denominator that we're going to multiply this through by is going to have an x. And I'm also going to need a 4. So we're going to multiply each of the terms by 4x. And if we do this multiplication here, in our first fraction, the x and x will simplify, leaving us with 5 times 4. Plus, in the middle parenthesis, the 4 and 4 will simplify, leaving us with 7 times our x. And on the other side, our last fraction, the x and x will simplify, leaving us with negative 9 times 4. Questions on this so far? Now at this point here, we need to do some multiplication. 5 times 4 is going to give us 20. 7 times x is 7x. And negative 9 times 4 is going to be negative 36. Now this time here, we don't have an x squared, we just have an x to the first power. So all we need to do is get it by itself. Get variables on one side, numbers on the other. So the first thing we can do here is subtract 20 from both sides. Telling us that 7x is equal to negative 56. And lastly, we can divide both sides by 7, telling us x is equal to negative 8. Is that one of our restrictions? Nope. So that's the solution. Even though we do have 3 terms, 3 fractions, it doesn't make it any harder or more complicated. We just need to find that least common denominator between the 3 denominators instead of the 2. Questions on this so far? Restrictions. Two denominators where we could have a 0. One of them is the x minus 5, the other is the x. Now with our x minus 5, we can solve it to see what's going to make that be 0. We add 5 to both sides, telling us that if x is equal to 5, we'd have a division of 0. It doesn't work. Well, the other one's just saying x can't be 0. Least common denominator. One doesn't have a denominator other than 1, and our other two are x and x minus 5, which is really just telling us our least common denominator. What we're going to multiply through is x and x minus 5. So we're going to multiply everything by x times x minus 5. Now with our 1, nothing's going to simplify out. We're just going to have 1 times x, or just x, times our x minus 5. Minus, in the middle term, our x minus 5 and x minus 5 will cancel, leaving us with 8 times x, or 8x, is equal to, and in our last fraction, the x and x will cancel, telling us that we have 3 times our x minus 5. Now at this point here, we just need to multiply through and see what we have. X times x will be x squared. X times negative 5 is negative 5x. Minus 8x is equal to 3 times x is 3x. 3 times negative 5 is negative 15. Now we do have some like terms here that we can simplify. Negative 5x minus 8x is going to be 13x. Negative 13x is equal to 3x minus 15. Again, so this one here, just like one of the ones we had earlier, we do have an x squared. We have a term to a power greater than 1, which means we need to get this equation equal to 0. So we're going to subtract 3x from both sides, telling us that x squared minus 16x is equal to negative 15. Then we're going to add 15 to both sides. X squared minus 16x plus 15 is equal to 0. Questions on how we got this equal to 0? Questions on this so far? Now at this point here, we can factor it. 2 sets of parentheses with 3 spaces. Since our third term is positive, the signs are the same and match the sign of the middle term, so negative and negative. Our factors of x squared are x and x. And our factors of 15 are 1 and 15, 3 and 5. Well, the set of factors that we're going to want are 1 and 15, and that will give us our negative 16x. And again, at this point here, we have two things multiplied together to equal 0. So either x minus 1 is 0, or x minus 15 is going to be 0. Now with our x minus 1, we can add 1 to both sides, telling us that one of our solutions is x is equal to 1. And with our x minus 15, we can add 15 to both sides, telling us that x is equal to 15. And our restrictions are 5 and 0. Neither one of these are our restrictions, so 1 and 15 are the solutions. That's it. Questions on any of this here? Question on anything we've done so far? Question? All right, let's look at this one here. Restrictions. Well, there's only one variable in the bottom, and any of these fractions, it does show up in 2 places, and that variable is just x. Now we need to figure out the denominator, what we're going to multiply through. Well, x does show up in 2 different places, but again, it only shows up once in each of those places. It shows up to the first power. So we just need to multiply it by x. Because if we do that, this first denominator and this x will cancel. This other denominator and this x will cancel. But not all the denominators simplified. What other term do we need? 2. So we're also going to have to multiply everything by 2 so that our middle denominator will cancel out with the 2. And what that leaves us with is 3 times 2, which is 6. Plus our middle term is 5 times x, which would be 5x is equal to negative 12 times 2 is negative 24. At this point here, we need to get the 5x by itself, so we can subtract 6 from both sides, telling us that 5x is equal to negative 30. Lastly, we can divide both sides by 5, telling us that x is equal to negative 6. And that's it. Questions on this here? Yep. Questions on anything we've done so far? We'll look at this last one, and then you will have the rest of the time to work on the assignment. Restrictions. Now for this one here, there's 2 places where x, we could get a 0, a division of 0. One of them is when our denominator of x, the other is x minus 4. Well, for our x minus 4, we can add 4 to both sides, telling us that x is equal to positive 4. Well, if we get an x value of positive 4, it would give us a division of 0. That does not work. The other is when x is by itself and it equals 0, we'd have a division of 0. It doesn't work. So our two denominators are our x and x minus 4, which means we are going to have to multiply through by x for sure, because multiply through by 1x will cause this one denominator here to cancel out. But we also need an x minus 4 for the middle term because it shows up once in the middle term. Now what that leaves us with is 1 times x, which is just going to be x, times our x minus 4, minus 2 times x is going to be 2x. And lastly, we have 4 times our x minus 4. Now we need to simplify. On the left-hand side, we're going to distribute the x. Our x times x is going to be x squared. X times negative 4 is going to be negative 4x minus 2x is equal to our 4 times x is 4x. 4 times negative 4 is going to be negative 16. Combine like terms, negative 4x minus 2x is going to be negative 6x. Now we do need to get it equal to 0 because we do have an x squared term. So we can subtract 4x first, then add 16, telling us that x squared minus 10x plus 16 is equal to 0. Questions on this here? Now this one here we'll graph. We'll graph this one. Squared minus 10x plus 16. You see that it does cross the x-axis at 2 points. Those two x values will make the y value be 0. One of them is going to be 2, and the other is 8. So when x is equal to 2 and x is equal to 8, would give us a value of 0, and those values actually also solve our original irrational equation. And if I wanted to check it, we don't have to. If I wanted to check these, we could say 1 minus 2 over 2 minus 4 is equal to 4 over 2. On bottom, 2 minus 4 is going to be negative 2. 4 divided by 2 is 2. Or 2 divided by negative 2 would be negative 1. Negative 1 minus negative 1. Same as 1 plus 1, which will indeed give us 2. Our other answer that we had was 1 minus, so it'd be 2 over 8 minus 4 is equal to 4 over 8. 8 minus 4 is going to be 4. 4 over 8 is 1/2. Or 2 over 4 is 1/2, and 1 minus 1/2 is indeed 1/2. So 2 and 8 are indeed the correct answers for this here. So we are able to plug them back in, plug in those x values to make sure that we do get a triple statement. Questions on any of this here? Yeah, the rest of the class time to work on the assignment.